Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, friends. Hope everyone is safe and healthy. It's good to see so many socially sensitive people from across the world joining this session. My name is Shrikant Bilwadi. My wife Chitra and I are volunteers for Asha for Education, Silicon Valley, here in California. First of all, we'd like to express a sincere thanks to all the volunteers at Team Asha for their help in organizing this webinar. Also, thanks to the members of Indians for Collective Action and many Google employees who have helped spread the word. And of course, to every one of you who have taken time to attend this session. Clearly, we are in unprecedented times, and there are several organizations and founders who are doing excellent work on the ground in India that we are all associated with in some way or the other. However, there's one founder who has essentially redefined charity and giving in India. He has consistently challenged the mindset of donors. He has even challenged the vocabulary, the words that we use as donors and beneficiaries in social sector. He has highlighted and brought to the forefront the importance of reverence and gratitude in the act of giving, the importance of dignity of the receiver more than anything else. And we're very fortunate to have with us our very close friend Anshu Gupta, the founder of Gunj. Anshu actually needs no introduction for people on this webinar, but I'd like to do it anyway out of affection and just the pride of knowing him as a close friend for over 10 years now. Anshu, as most of us know, is an Ashoka Fellow. He's a recipient of the Social Entrepreneur of the Year Award by Schwab Foundation, and is also the recipient of the prestigious Raman Magsaysay Award. But even beyond all awards, I know Anshu to be a very great human being. He's a close friend and an inspiration to many of us. Also, from what I know, Anshu was likely the first person, or at least the most prominent person that we know of, who made clothing as a subject for the development sector. He brought out the importance of kapda in the roti, kapda, makan, the three things that we always talk about. Over the last 18 years, the Cloth for Work initiative of Gunj has provided dignity for people, has saved thousands of people's lives in winters, and has provided sanitary pads for women in rural India. But even more than that, Gunj has transformed essentially the urban waste, the used clothing, utensils, toys, furnitures that we discard into infrastructure development, into rural employment, clean drinking water, schooling, village roads, and more. Team Gunj, with its vast network and presence in over 20 states in India, is also at the forefront, takes leadership position during every disaster in India, responding to the crisis immediately, but also in rehabilitation. And today we are in the midst of a disaster unlike anything that we have seen before. And we're very fortunate to have Anshu share his time and thoughts with us. We want to make this an interactive session. The webinar format we know is not ideal. However, we'll try to do our best. The participants cannot speak, but there is a chat box and a Q&A where you can type your questions. Chitra and I will be following that, and we will ask those questions on your behalf. Before we turn this over to Anshu, I wanted to play a poem that I came across recently. I hope this video plays well on the webinar.
सुनो, तुम अब गांव में ही बस जाना, 2 सूखी रोटी खाना, पर वापस ना आना। जानता हूं गांव की जमीन गिरवी रखाए थे और छुड़ाने को कुछ जोड़ ही ना पाए तुम। दिन लगाना, रात को खटना, पर वापस ना आना। हमने गंदी गलियां दी थी ना रहने को तुमको, तुम्हारी खोली जूती थी ना किसी बड़ी बिल्डिंग के बाजू में, स्कूल अलग थे ना तुम्हारे बच्चों के, तुम न जाने किस किस को हफ्ता चुकाते थे, और फिर तुम्हारे तो ठेले भी लाठी खाते थे। हम तुम्हें दीनहीन गरीब बेचारा कहते थे ना, खुद घरों में घुसकर तुम्हें सड़कों पर भूखा पैदल छोड़ा था ना, बस तुम वापस ना आना। यकीन मानना ये सारे शब्द बदलेंगे, बेचारा कौन है अब हम शायद समझेंगे।
Anshu, before I hand this over to you, many of us read the reports and also eager to know what's happening on the ground. But maybe it would be just useful for you to start with why you wrote that poem and what's the situation on the ground after that.
So I started writing back. I started. I'm back on my poetry, which I used to do earlier, and I started writing something called Kovidi, right? And so this was the first poem, and the second more, and then it is just going on. And why? Because some of us know that Goonj is there for last 21 years. And has been there at the forefront in so many disasters. Whatever little we could do, because disaster is too huge a thing to handle, and we are only just a small component somewhere, try to do our bit. So in the last 2 decades and before that, because my journey, my exposure to Village India, my exposure to disaster actually started way back when I was a student of mass communication, and then I had gone to Uttarkashi after an earthquake, and that was the first time I saw the village or a disaster. Since then, almost half of my life have seen disasters, and because I'm also majorly into photography, so I've captured those images of distress, of destruction, of dead bodies of all kind. But I can tell you that no other disaster has broken me the way this particular disaster has broken. And it's a very emotional thing, I think, because you started with emotion, so I'm more than the practical part. I'm really talking about it because this disaster is actually all about humanity and emotion. I think something went wrong in a big way. All the big offices, all the huge hospital buildings, in many cases all the huge so-called health and the most efficient health systems, all the insurance schemes, all the big religious buildings, all the big cars, everything on which some of us really die. I'm not saying the entire world, but at least 1/3 of the world or a sizable chunk of the world really die, where we just think of the numbers, where we think our aspirations are some of the cars or the houses or the jobs or the most lucrative jobs and all. To be honest, there is nothing with us which really became very valuable. So I would say the world is divided in 2 parts right now. One, the people who are suffering directly with the virus, or there is any symptom of that. Even psychologically, if you have a symptom, you're a part of that. And the other word is which does not have anything to do with COVID, at least as a virus. Then I say about my country and many other countries that, again, the countries in the world are actually divided in 2 parts. One, the people who have food, and the others, the people who do not have food. Someone who has food is inside the house. Someone who does not have food is slowly coming out on the road. In India, this disaster started as a health disaster the way worldwide it is. But in India, it has become a much larger disaster of displacement, of migration, of hunger. And for sure, like any other country in the world, of joblessness, where people are losing jobs, people will lose jobs. I mean, I was just giving an example today that if you see the Ola and the Uber in India, and these are the people who, many of them even own a car, which is almost 6 to 8 lakhs rupees or maybe more in some cases. Today, we understand that even they are daily wages because you have a car of 6 lakh, 8 lakhs standing outside your home. And for the last 2 months, because you have not earned anything, because you have not taken any ride, you're also in the queue to receive food. That's your destiny, unfortunately. A lot of people are talking good about the India's informal economy and saying that no, because India has informal economy, that's why it will not suffer much, it will come back. Somehow, I'm not an economist. I think I just studied the economics of villages, economics of large number of people, how do they manage their money and how do they live life. I think that's what little bit we could understand in the last 2 decades. I'm saying that informal economy is what? Informal economy is that where large number of people do not have secure job, where large number of people are daily wagers, where large number of people survive on crop to crop. If for the last 2 months, large number of people haven't got a single wages because they are daily wages, how do you think that people will really survive? For me, it's a personal sadness. And many of us are going through that phase. Just before this, we had a small, this Zoom meeting of our key team members, and we were actually talking the same thing, that somewhere we as human being also are the losers. And when I say human being, a whole lot of us lost, but the people like us who did a bit better in our life, at least to be secured inside our homes. I'm saying that in a country like India, where large part of the migration happens and reverse migration happens, where these millions of people started walking all of a sudden, it's not about their desperation, it's not about their hunger, it's also about the deficit of trust. When large number of people do not trust their employers, their governments, their ecosystem, their neighbors, the person, whose vehicle this guy was driving, the person whose kitchen this lady was taking care of, and if they don't trust that system and they start on a journey of a few hundred kilometers without even knowing where are they going to, and despite knowing that there is no train, no bus, no truck, people don't know how many kilometers, how much time will it take, because usually they used to go once in a while by a bus or a train, and the only thing they knew that these many days, these many nights, and that's how you reach a village. So what happened? Why did people walk? Or why did people go away from the cities? My answer to that is that because we have never ever treated them with dignity. We have never ever treated them as fellow citizens. For most of us in the development sector, in the government, in the corporate, the best doers in the society, because of whom we have come up in our life, and we are sitting in the secure places. For most of us, these people have been the beneficiaries. We as a nation, we as a world, especially India, has never ever cared for its farmers. We are so worried, so careful about the food and the taste of the food, but farmer we hardly think of. Agriculture, we never took as a serious profession. Farmer is still an unskilled person. Bring that person to the city, make them a carpenter, and then we suddenly start calling that person a skilled person. And the same person does not trust us. I mean, how ironical it is that the people who made our houses are actually homeless and are on the roads across the globe, not only in India. People who grow rice and dal and maybe mangoes and fruits and tomatoes for us are actually foodless. Our kitchens are full. We are there on the 47th day of the lockdown, as Shrikant said, or whatever day I'm not counting. Because for me, lockdown is not a date. That's a very unfortunate way of thinking. Lockdown is till the time I can hug you and you can hug me. Lockdown is till the date people really come back on their foot and they start working and they start earning. So lockdown is just not a date which is announced by the government. So it's so ironical that in this entire phase, when my kitchen was full, I was able to get deliveries of whatever I wanted, even paneer, even milk and butter. Large number of people who have been growing for us, because of whom we are sitting inside and have maybe have stored food for next few months or couple of months. They are actually in the queues to get just 100 grams of cooked meals or a kg of ration. How ironical is this? And how sad it is. That's a question we all need to really ask ourselves. That's a big question all of us need to ask across the globe. That why, how did it happen that we ignored such huge communities who didn't have any trust on us, who didn't have any resources to survive? And we all very happily call them beneficiaries. I mean, it is so sad to see this time also. There are a lot of good, beautiful people, including some corporates and foundations, who are dealing with it so beautifully. And then there are large number of jokers, fine, who are exactly the same, who want to handle it in a program mode, who want a weekly report, who also want a pre-survey done because before implementing your program. Some of them want a TikTok video of the victim of the disaster. And what we are not understanding, that sitting inside home, we are also the victim of the disaster. We cannot even move out of our homes. And right now, because our stomach is full, we have rice and dal or whatever. We do not consider ourselves the victim of the disaster. I hate the word victim. That's why I'm pressing it again and again. I hate the word beneficiary. That's why I'm saying it again and again. Because at the end of the day, this disaster has also proved that farmer or the so-called poor person was never a beneficiary. We are the biggest beneficiary, and we have been, a part of this beneficiary racket or the cycle forever, and we will remain beneficiary because I survived sitting inside home. Someone else does not survive outside this home. Then who is the beneficiary? Because my food was secured, I'm here. That's why I call myself a beneficiary. It's so sad to see that a large part of the world is so human, so beautiful, especially in India. We have seen it in so many other countries, but if I talk about India, a large number of individuals have really, really come out and have done wonders and have connected with the grassroots institutions, have cooked meals in their homes, have just opened up whatever little money they had. I mean, you must have heard this story of two brothers selling a house and feeding people. I mean, that's the beauty of human being. Now, unfortunately, that's a smaller number. We wanted a much larger number to operate on this because the magnitude of this disaster is absolutely different. It is not like any other disaster which happened in past. But in the same way, some people have been, acting funny. They're not understanding that this is not like any other disaster. This is not a disaster which happened. It's not like earthquake or flood, which just happened for a few seconds or few hours or few days, and then the recovery happens. This is a disaster which is unfolding. There is no end date to this disaster. We don't know what are the consequences. It started with the health disaster and it converted into hunger all across the country. I mean, this beautiful campaign which is going on with Indiaspora Chalo Give. Many of you must have watched it, and this Chalo Give has two partners: one Feeding America in US and Gunj in India, and you see the number of people who are also going hungry in the so-called most developed nation. That is the nature of the disaster because it is still unfolding. In our life of Gunj, where we have handled. We've been a part of large number of disasters in terms of recovery and response and all. This is first ever pan-India disaster. This is a disaster where a whole lot of our model we had to change because we are an organization which used to deal a lot with the second-hand goods. This is a disaster where we cannot accept even a small socks or handkerchief, which is second-hand right now. We had to completely change the model, the way we have been operating in terms of material. But because fortunately for last 2 decades, we have been handling material, we have been handling, the logistics, and we also understand a little bit about the communities. So we do understand that if you are working in North, the basmati tukda is fine and the chana dal is fine. But if you go to the south, you need to buy a different kind of rice, or maybe in some parts of Karnataka, ragi only, no rice is eaten. And also the chana dal will not operate, but the tur dal will operate. I mean, this is something what we've been doing in the last 21 years. We are not worried about the people who are giving, but we are more worried about the people who are receiving it, whether it is matching the need to some extent or not. And also that too with a lot of dignity. I mean, there are a lot of people, including some government machineries, who are calling 5 kg, 6 kg ration enough for 10 days, 15 days, 20 days. It is such a shame to listen to these conversations, to be honest. I mean, because maybe these people haven't bought ration for a month ever, so they don't have an idea that a family of 4 to 6 actually need at least 2 kg, 1.5 kg of ration, and this time much more, because there is nothing to add in that. There is no vegetable available that way immediately for every family. So just a couple of more points, and then we open it up for Q&A. And I think in the Q&A itself, I'll tell you about the Goonj approaches and all that, but I just wanted to convey the larger picture. In India, for sure, it is unfolding. This is also about millions and millions of people. Unfortunately, the entire focus so far has been the migrants in the cities. Migrants who are stuck here, who couldn't cross the borders, or the people who are jobless. What people are not understanding that like in past, we are again making a mistake of ignoring the 70% population of India, the feeding ball, the village India, because of which we all are sitting and standing and talking and eating or whatever, because this is the same village India which as a farmer they grow food for us, then they come to the city in desperation, they become driver, they drive our vehicle, they come here in desperation, someone becomes a maid who comes from maybe West Bengal or Odisha, or a painter comes from UP, a plumber comes from Odisha. That's how the entire migration happens. Suddenly that farmer who has a couple of acres of land, because we never took care of that, we valued more, we never valued farmer, but we valued food. We never called farming a skill, got them here, and that's how that entire distortion happened. My regret right now is that even today, large number of people are ignoring villages, despite knowing in this particular disaster that in this disaster, not even a single person was walking or was coming from the village to the city. All those millions of people, lakhs of people, whatever number, we don't know, but this is huge. You all must have seen pictures. We are still looking at those pictures. That's a regular phenomena, even today, daily phenomena. Every single person who is gone, that person is, whether walking or whatever way, that person is actually gone from the city to the village. Indian villages right now, which are already resource starved, have much more population and much lesser resources. For 2 months, if the city people didn't have an employment, the village people also didn't have an employment. I can just give you a last story of a tomato or an onion, which I've been sharing in every single, such kind of session, just to give you the gravity of it. So when the tomato is not available for me and you, maybe because I'm in a red zone, so I can't go out, or the vegetable guy is not coming on a daily basis. What matters for me is my taste of the sambar or rajma. That's what matters if I don't get a tomato. But if that tomato is not available to me, you need to understand that in Kolar in Karnataka and many other belts of India, tons and tons of tomato is actually lying in the field. It's absolutely perishable. After a few days, if you don't take it out, it will be destroyed. It will also destroy the entire ecosystem. So the farmer is affected in a very, very big way. Then that entire chain where someone was plucking that tomato or growing that tomato, then someone was loading that tomato, then someone was transporting those smaller vehicles, then the wholesaler, then the retailer. And I can tell you that in this entire chain, 80% people, 70% people are affected back in the villages, not in the cities. Uh, we are trying to tell everyone that this is the time for us to rebuild India uh, in a completely different way, where we value agriculture, farmer, villages much more than we always used to do. Uh, for us, village was just a countryside, and some of the people who migrated from the villages have done wonders in their life. For them, it's just a summer vacation kind of stuff. I think we never understood what Indian village is all about. So Goons is not that we are not doing it in city. I mean, I was just picking up the data of the last few weeks, and we found that almost 11,000 families with the comprehensive family kit we have even reached in the city of Delhi itself in the last few weeks. But our larger focus is certainly the villages of India, and that's what I want to bring focus, because these are the most dignified people on this earth. And when I'm saying Vapas Matana, don't come back, I mean it, because the way we have treated those millions of people, they always came to the cities in desperation. Fine, Chitra, you are migrated. Shrikant, you are migrated. I am migrated. I migrated from, say, Dehradun. You must have migrated from one city to another. But every single political leader, sitting in Delhi, at least, or in other state capitals, are migrated people. All the big business guys are migrated people. Fine. But unfortunately, the people who are on the road are called migrated, but people who are well settled, we are not even called migrated. So I think it's important to change the lens, the way we have been operating, and then deal with this disaster and take it as an opportunity to rebuild India. I mean, this entire infrastructure with a lot of dignity, with a lot of respect, with a lot of love. I think that's my emotional and practical message, and then the rest of it I'll answer in the Q&A or comments.
Anshu, whenever you speak, it's both heartbreaking and inspirational at the same time. I will try to keep this as questions for others who can ask. For everybody, there are two ways you can ask the questions. Either put that on Q&A, or you can also put that on chat, but the chat is probably open, or you're sending it only to a few of us. So if you have a question for Anshu, please use the Q&A. So Sunil is asking this question, Sunil Kumar. Government of Maharashtra, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, they're either suspending the labor laws, or they have requested for suspending labor laws. And what in your opinion, will this have on the post-COVID situation, not just for these laborers, but also on farmers and daily wages, but also the impact of that on the rural economy?
Listen, and the irony is that we are even saying that we are supporting people by doing this. I mean, how do you support a person by forcing that person to work for 12 hours instead of 8 hours, and taking away all the social benefits which took years and decades to come in the picture? And even after that, even after all those regulations and being there in the books for many years, large number of people do not follow that. Large number of people in this country, large number of employers who have become the richest possible people in this country have not paid or are not paying even the basic minimum wages to the people that way. So, I mean, if those wages were so nice, if people were treated very nicely, they wouldn't have gone back. I think it's a proof. Now, because the people are in desperation, because if we don't take care of people in the villages, they will be forced to come back here. Are we trying to exploit them further by removing all these securities which are essential for people, the basic minimum laws? That's a big question, and somehow I don't know how it operates. Ideally, it should be more people-friendly policies now, after going such distance. The policies cannot be just in the favor of the rich people or the industrialists or the industry. I mean, industry is all about people. So it needs to be certainly people-friendly. So it will have in my opinion, it will have a lot of negative impact. on the life of people who are already suffering a lot. Very point blank.
And there are actually a few questions which are all related. I'll try to combine them. One is the impact on this on the rural economy in the coming months, right? I think you touched upon it even when you introduced, but more specifically, the question is that their income is tenuous. How can we change that? And also, is this an opportunity, right, for India to relook at rural economy beyond just farming? So these are some of the questions. I've tried to combine about a couple of questions on that front, Anshu.
So, Shikha, if we, I'm saying I'm not an economist or I can predict a lot of things, but if we, more than the numbers, I think now all of us in the world really need to work with the common sense also. And numbers alone will not do anything. It is already proved that I think we were wrong in numbers always. This is now proven. So if we use the common sense, we know that in a country like India, more people can be satisfied and employed if we work more in the villages, and not only farming, but even any water-based industry, even processing of food, lot of other stuff. If we think through, if in the cities we have been thinking and we have been able to coming up with all kind of new innovations. Suddenly the hotel thing is structured and it has created so much of employment. Suddenly the travel booking is structured, it has created so much of employment. All these things 10-15 years back, even in India or in the cities, never used to exist. And when we started putting our brain, time, money, energy, we started innovating, we started finding a lot of new job opportunities for the people. The entire software sector, the whole lot of things which are the new innovations in the cities. Unfortunately, in the villages, because we have never been careful about the village or mindful about the village, we have never put in our brains there. I am saying that even agriculture has such a huge scope if we do it rightly there. The fact also remains, again, I am repeating that in the village, you can still survive and grow maybe in just 5,000, 6,000 rupees of your income. But if you come to the cities in 15,000 rupees, what you get, we have seen. Not that this poverty and migration was not there in India or in many other countries. Not that homeless people were not there in US. There was huge chunk of people in every country which were going through acute poverty. But unfortunately, we never saw that because we didn't want to see that. Now, because of hunger, everything is just come up and we can see it. In my opinion, whatever little knowledge I have, by working literally in this field, one of the biggest way to bring back people on, say in terms of employment and at least a survival, is coming back to the agriculture and other industries or other work which we can create in rural India. Instead of, so that theory that if you want to solve the problem of rural India, bring them to the city and the poverty can go away, it never went away, never ever. All those were absolutely wrong, useless theories, and this disaster has actually proved those. So time to go back to the villages and time to value people and look through the issues and the solutions from the lenses of those people instead of the lenses of the people who have studied in the best possible universities and management institutions and have decided the fate of the village India. No, that is not the way forward.
Thanks, Anshu. Anshu, this is actually a question directly to you from Reshma. It's not in Q&A, but I think it was very relevant and I'm asking it. You have a influence and also contacts with the policymakers and decision makers, right? The question was, how can you help change the policy in India such that a square meal is free and available for every citizen? Because you're advocating that the food and healthcare is a basic human right, just like clothing is. So it's a question to you, to Gunj, but also many people who are able to influence this.
Reshma, somewhere it is my personal failure in the last 2 decades of Gunj, and despite knowing that some people love, some people hate, some people listen, but I think I have not made use of that uh, in the policy part. I mean, practice part we have been able to make a huge dent, because the way a lot of things used to operate in the sector and in the country, our approach and the evidence which we created has certainly made a lot of difference in the practice part of it. But policy, I think somewhere we failed, and I should not even call it a failure, because we didn't try. If we would have tried and people wouldn't have listened to us, then it was a failure. But I think we didn't try. We were so overwhelmed, we were so busy in tackling the on ground thing always. And 2013 onwards, when this country saw almost every year one major huge disaster, I think our focus also a little bit shifted in just tackling the problems more than talking to the policymakers and all. In the last 2 months, I've been doing a lot of these webinars and a lot of discussions with the people, but I think we need to really work more. We need to certainly work more. I don't know whether any government really values us or not. We don't know, because we hardly get invitation from the government to become a part of these policy decisions. Wherever we get, we become a part of it. But maybe our language is not liked. Maybe people are still not ready to accept that Village India is a solution, or alternate model of working is still a solution. I don't know. I think we really need to work on it, but it is there in our mind, and this is also the right time to really make a dent. If we didn't do it earlier, we should do it now.
Thank you, Anshu. I think it's one of this. Again, you always speak from the heart, and it's so direct. Let me go to another question. Again, this is in the chat. It's relevant, and I'm asking. Gunj is fairly centralized in the sense that most of the administration and other things happen in, at least that's a view of people here in Delhi. And how can you and the headquarter monitor local volunteers and a large network of more than 150 organizations that you work with on the ground? And how is Gunj responding to disaster, developing these strategies, and can respond so quickly in these situations?
We can respond so quickly because it is one of the most decentralized organizations in the country. I mean, you are sitting a few hundred or few thousand miles away. So you need to really come here and experience it, because out there, either some people know me, or some people have heard Gunj, or large number of people know that we are in the business of collecting and distributing flows. All are wrong. This is exactly one of the most decentralized organizations, where we have 20 different offices, small and big. Every office, so we call it guided democracy, where we have really larger guidelines, and those guidelines are not top down. Every year, couple of times, 3 times, the entire key team really meets. And when we say key team is not limited to the chapter head, but also many people from the chapter. All of us, 70, 80 of us, at least twice in a year, we sit and we see that whatever we have practiced, can we put it in the piece of paper. Right now, we're doing the same with the Zoom calls twice in a week for handling this disaster. We work with a few hundred partners. 150 is just so far to in responding to COVID thing, but otherwise we work with a few hundred partner organization, which is panchayats, local community-based organization, NGOs, Ashoka Fellows, social entrepreneurs, units of Indian Army, Border Road Organization. So we actually see the strength of that institution or that group, that who has the connect with the local people, who knows the politics and the ecosystem and the geography of that area. So like if you want to work in the non-valley area of Kashmir, the only partner with whom you can really work is the units of Indian Army, because of whole kind of restriction and because they know every single thing about that area. So that's how we build up those partnerships. Now, there are different departments who take care of it. I mean, today, to be honest, even if you ask me how many districts we are working in COVID, I wouldn't know, because that's the partnership team which would know, or that's a data team which knows it. Every Friday they compile the data. Every Saturday we get it. So I'll have current data I can tell you, but I can only tell you on Saturday. So this is one, and you can imagine the people who think that it is all centralized to Delhi or to me. I think all of you need to understand that before COVID, I used to travel 15 to 20 days. in a month. And if the so-called founder or so-called director travels 15 to 20 days and is not connected with the team on a day-to-day basis in terms of operation, and the operation has only grown in the last few years, uh, because you were not a part of it on a day-to-day basis, maybe that shows that it is decentralized. In terms of COVID, uh, we are already there. If I pick up this Friday data, 20 plus states, more than 700,000 kgs of dry ration, primarily in the villages of India also, and other essentials. More than about 200 partnerships now. Every week it is growing. And this is how we completely decentralize the model further. And we said that every district, every institution, every place will take care of its own community there. We will directly deal with the institution. There is a proper material management system. This is how the kit is made, because that's what we know. This is what we've been doing even without a disaster. This is how the money will be transferred. This is how the bill will be made. This is how we will procure from the. So I mean, if you're following social media for the last month or so, we are more than the clothes and all. We are actually dealing in the vegetables and the sabji, because we are one of the approach of Gunj is that how do we make sure that the farmers really survive? They do not do a distress selling. We are not even buying the things on the cost price. We are buying it on the selling price. So in our kit, we are actually adding tons and tons of vegetables. So you buy like tomato and kaddu from couple of farmers of the village, and that thing really goes to hundreds of families in the village. So we have been able to yes, scale up in a big way, because not because we are expert of anything, but just because in the last 2 decades we created a huge grid in the country, which is called pipeline, if we want, which is the pipeline of relationship with the community-based organization, know-how of the transport system, know-how of what is the local need, and also understanding the material packing to logistics. That's how we have been able to scale it up.
Anshu, again, first of all, there's so overwhelming number of questions. I do not think in 1 hour we'll be able to answer this. So I apologize in advance for so many questions that we may not be able to cover here. Again, I will try to combine a couple of questions on the same theme. One is, what is your recommendations to nonprofits who may not have the same set of resources, or maybe even if they have, work with the governments? And also, how is Gunj complementing some of the work that government is doing? Because this is a challenge which is beyond any one particular organization that can be fulfilled.
So to be honest, today we are also standing at a position where we cannot say that we have enough resources, because this is one disaster where you are just buying things and actually reaching it out to people. No earlier models are working where you can even accept a lot of material from people. I mean, today we put a post where we said that now we are accepting material also, but that with so much of restrictions and social distancing, not social, actually physical distancing. Social distancing is the wrong term. We should really get away from this, because socially we need to be much more closer. It is physical distancing. I'm just trying to put this kida in everybody's mind. So how do you really receive that material now? So we will not say that we have enough resources to tackle this disaster, because earlier the disaster used to happen in one locality and other parts of the country and the world used to support that. Now it is pan-India, pan-globe. Smaller institutions must work with the local authorities and also local farmers and all, and not that every single person has to distribute ration only. There are all other needs of the society which are needed. So I'm actually telling all the volunteers and people that whatever strength you have, just put it on a piece of paper. The fact remains that even if you are a good singer, you are needed. If you are a good poetry person, you are needed. If 5 people listen to you and feel comfortable with you, you are needed. So one of the best part of community-based organization is that they have a huge connect with the community, and they are the last mile people who can deliver anything. I don't know because in most of the cases, what I have seen is that it's not that the government is actually giving any ration or something to the NGOs to give it. Rather, unfortunately, NGOs are actually buying it from the Food Corporation of India, and then giving it, and they are largely raising their own money. I don't think that, at least I don't know. Maybe there must be some cases all of you must be knowing, where the governments are actually passing on any money and all to the NGOs to operate. So they are completely dependent on raising their own resources and working on it. In terms of complementing or supplementing government efforts and all, I mean, the fact remains that the voluntary sector is one of the key sector in India, and the common citizen who are actually on a large scale taking care of the hunger part. I mean, it's mostly the NGOs which are doing it as of now. I mean, government must be sending direct ration to some people wherever the card system and all is applicable. But otherwise, people who are on the roads, people who are those millions of people who are jobless in the cities, who do not have ration card or those social security systems, or they're basically gone. They were stationed there, so their ration card was of this place, but they've moved to some other place. All those are actually taken care by the voluntary sector or the social development sector.
Actually, this is a follow-up, I think, Anuradha's question also. Is there a role for the non-profits to ensure that the government funds, we all know how inefficient the public distribution and the healthcare system is. Is there a role for the non-profits to ensure that the government funds are delegated and utilized properly to help these affected communities?
So Anuradha, it is your role also. Why do we expect everything from the not-for-profit sector? Not-for-profit sector is already busy, in risking their own life and trying to feed people. Why can't the common citizen also raise issues on this? Why can't you go to the district administration or call them up and say that where is your money going? Or the village people and all. I mean, I am saying that unfortunately, we do expect a lot from the voluntary sector. Unfortunately, I think this is a time when every single common citizen also has to play his or her role in whatever way you can. I mean, take a sheet, make a list of every single connect or contact you have. I'm pretty sure you will have at least 5 influential government officers in your list. And if you just pick up a phone and talk to those 5 people, I'm pretty sure at least one of them will take a good action. I mean, that's how the entire network has to work. Every single person has to take his or her own initiatives right now. And we need to understand that unlike any other disaster where we used to give 5,000 rupees and used to say we have supported the people, this disaster cannot be tackled like that. It's a role of not-for-profit, it's a role of business, it's a role of government official, it's a role of common citizen to make the machinery answerable wherever the money is, whosoever is responsible to take care of such disasters.
Thank you, Anshu. Many of us are also working in Asha for Education, and I will read this question from Ranjani literally. The COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in a very profound impact on education in India. Many children have lost their lives, their most important meal of the day. It is a real possibility that children and youth of migrant workers may not be able to go back to schools. How is Gunj thinking about the long-term impact to education in India and any policy response or changes that are needed?
So to be honest, I'm also worried that right now we are promoting a lot of this e-education thing right now, okay, which is good for sure, but we should also remember that there is something called de-addiction classes and courses, used to happen before COVID, where a lot of rich people and other people were actually approaching these guys and saying that our kids are addicted to mobile and laptop and we need to move out of it. So I'm saying for the time being, yes, it's a huge crisis. And I know that it was for all of us, whatever we have done in the last 2 decades or many, many years, whether we worked on education, health, or the rights of the women or the ignored communities like transgenders and sex workers and devdasis, uh, or people with any kind of disability. I think let's accept that, and let's understand that lot of work of lot of years we all have put in is actually now gone back to zero. And let's be honest about it, because all of us in this forum and Asha and many of these institution, what we did in the last few years, whether you talk about education or any other thing, people who were on the minus level, we were trying to bring those people to the zero level, and then to the +2 level. But what has happened because of this disaster, that a lot of people have again gone back to the minus level. So I think let's start talking about basics again. Let's be ready to redo what we have done. How? We still need to understand. When it opens up, we'll do. I'm pretty sure that the schools can run. I'm pretty sure that the way factories will run, the way our institutions will run, your office will run, this will also run. I am pretty sure that not everyone has a luxury, or not everything can happen, by work from home. We all need to think in a very innovative way, that how do we really tackle this change scenario. But most important for all of us is to be absolutely ready to redo it and start from zero. And don't think that I'm a pessimist kind of person, and I'm basically adding more sorrow. I'm saying that I can see the real picture right now, and I just wish that I'm absolutely proved wrong. And we see a situation where we don't find people in the minus level. But as a doer, or as a team of doers, it's our responsibility to accept the reality and then make a strategy on that, so that when we make the strategy, we consider the reality, not just the hypothesis or the earlier data.
Thanks, Anshu. In a minute, I'll also ask Vidya from Asha for Education, both to ask any questions or summarize her perspective. And after that, or I do not know, Vidya, if you want to do it before, is that most people on this webinar would like to know channels through which they can support the work of Gunj, and also for other organizations that you think it makes sense. We could answer it either way. I don't know if Vidya can already speak. If she can, I'll request her to share her perspective. Vidya, you're on mute as of now.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Anshu. What you're doing on the ground is really, really important work. And we understand the challenges, because this comes pan-India usually, like, if there is any local disaster, it happens in one state. And I think this is the first time we are seeing pan-India, in fact, across the world. A lot of people are put in a very vulnerable situation, and I really hope things improve. And thanks a lot for all the work you and all the community partners are doing. Asha for Education works with nearly 200 nonprofits, community organizations on the ground, supporting education across 20 plus states in India. During this time of crisis, many of our partners have stepped up to help the local community address the needs, especially in many states where we are working with rural population. People do not get enough ration. Many migrant laborers in cities like Mumbai, Varanasi, and others, big cities, they do not have ration cards, and hence they can't avail some of the government schemes. So many of our community partners have stepped up to help them in this need of our, they've either helped them get the government relief measures or provided with ration. And we are so glad to be working with these community organizations, because one, they have the connect with the local group, they know the challenges on the ground, and we sitting here in US very often don't understand the magnitude of the problem. And we are glad to be working with them. We are glad we could have this session with you. So I'm sure everyone who attended today would have understood how big the need is, and Asha should step up in any way possible. And we hope we could help many such efforts. But I know that whatever we do is just a drop in the ocean, and it's definitely not enough. And we hope we could do more. So one of the questions that I have for you is, whatever you guys are doing is great. You have a lot of learnings and from whatever you're doing. Do you think some of these can actually go ahead and influence government policies? And how do you think we could go about doing that?
It should certainly influence policy. And one of the thing which we can notice in the last few days, uh, um, not that we were a part of any government meetings and all those kind of things, but because we've been talking and the media is also covering and about the rural India part, I think it has started making sense to a lot of people now. Earlier, people were not understanding it, but then they started looking at it that this, the reverse migration is not just something which happened for the first week. Even when they opened up and suddenly Gujarat said 20 lakh people want to go, Punjab said 6 lakh people want to go, they started registering 2 lakh, 20 lakh, whatever, but all huge numbers. So that is where now people have started understanding that whatever we are talking is making a little bit sense. And if you see Gunj poster, the first communication which we released, that actually has people walking. Okay, that's it. So we knew that something like this happened, but we obviously none of us knew that this is how it will happen, and it will happen to this scale, and we'll just keep going. But our focus has been there. Yes, as I said in my last comment also, that I think this is a time that I personally and we as an institution need to be a part of more of the policy dialogues. If we are invited, wonderful. And if we are not invited, I think we need to make effort to make our little bit space to enter in those nice fancy meetings, because fortunately these are happening through the Zoom calls right now.
I really hope some of the work that you're doing translates to policy changes, especially if we are to improve the rural economy. Definitely a lot of insights from organizations like Gunj will be really helpful. Yeah, thanks, Shrikant. I think I'll give it over to you. Probably you can take over more questions. Or
Thank you, Vidya. First of all, thanks for everybody else who's asked these questions. I do not think we will be able to walk through every single questions, but the promise that I can make is take these questions and share it with Team Gunj. And also an opportunity for you to ask these questions and participate in Facebook pages of Gunj. I do want to ask one question which Bhupen Uncle asked, but also in mind for all of us. How can we, he called it NRIs, but actually everybody, right? How can everybody contribute to this initiative? And what channels do you suggest for this team to be involved?
Okay, so Uncle is there. Uncle, namaskar to start with. So nice. I think we just need to really, first step is that we do as much as possible, because now we all know how much we need to eat in a month or two and how many clothes do we need. So all of us know exactly. And this is what we have been saying, that most of us even know that how big should be the house where I can really sweep myself, especially in India, because in US and all, you guys are still used to of doing a lot of work yourself. But we always have the luxury in India to get many people work around us. So we need to step up and do as much as possible. We also need to, give a free hand to the smaller institutions, because, as I said, it cannot happen in the program way. Everyday things are changing, and the grassroots institutions are very, very important institution. I mean, why we are able to scale up the effort, because we have very strong teams in grassroots, we also have very strong partners in grassroots. At grassroots, that's why we have been able to scale up. So we need to support as many people as possible, the smaller institutions. As far as Gunj is concerned, there are two right now very reliable, very nice, effective partnerships. ICA is one of the beautiful partnership for years we have, and a wonderful job ICA does, and Gunj is an integral part of it, of that. So the resources can come through ICA. The other initiative which is started and is doing very well, and very sensitive campaign is also a Chalo Give campaign by Indiaspora. So these are two channels where at least people sitting in India can, people sitting outside India can really, send us the resources. As Shrikant, you know that I think this must be my first ever session where I'm talking about money. I'm not known, to talk about money but this time we exactly know that this disaster is all actually about money, because you don't have to do anything. You really have to purchase as much as possible, because for the next few months it's all about hunger. And we also have to think long term, because this is not going to be solved immediately. So today only in the Zoom call, and this is what we've been discussing at Gunj, that how do we really create more job opportunities in the villages. So in many areas, our family kits actually have a seed pack also, and that seed is for the vegetables, because this is high time in India where we get rid of the cash crops, and we get more into the food crops and the vegetables and all, so that the farmer really gets some sustained income and is not completely dependent on monsoon, and whenever they suffer major losses. So most of our kit also have these seed kits. We are also working, like Bundelkhand, we are working with the people who are making baskets and hand fans. Then we are also reaching out to the weaver community, craftsman community, that instead of giving a ration kit for 3,000 rupees, 1 month it is fine. But second month, can we procure their material for 3,000 rupees so that the dignity is maintained, and they do not eat food what we give, but they eat food what they want. And their art also keeps working. So there are a lot of these initiatives are in place. I would ask everyone to really keep a track on the Gunj social media, and every Monday we release a 4-pager now, which talks about some of these strategies, some numbers, but largely about strategies, in a view that more people replicate these ideas, copy these ideas, and actually spread it in their network, in their communities, wherever they are working. So this Monday also, by the second half, this mailer will be out. So if Shrikant has the email IDs and all, or if we have, we'll make sure that all of you get it, and then you can always circulate it further. And money-wise, you can also directly send it to our accounts in India, but otherwise, Chalo Give and ICA are two major platforms there.
I do want to call out Asha for Education's campaign that they're doing for COVID relief. Anshu, thank you so much for taking time, and also thanks to the whole of Team Gunj who helped in both setting up of this webinar and for organizing. Thank you to Asha for Education, the folks in ICA, and many Google employees also who joined this call, and everyone who joined, asked these questions and participated. Again, we'll try to put some of these questions on your Facebook page or send to Team Gunj to respond. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And stay safe.
Thank you very much. Yes, stay safe.